I'm gonna give this a minute or two for people to file in. As usual, hello everybody, this is AW, and it's been a while since I've done anything. If anybody comes in, let me know how the audio quality is, video quality, see if everything's good, alright. Come on. As you can see, I'm not far from where I did my last attempt at a stream. Walking in the same park where I was homeless about 2.5 months ago. And as usual, I'm with my little buddy over there somewhere. Can't see him. Oh, yes, there you go. There you see him. But anyways, life is life, and I've been working, one would say like a dog, but I don't know, looking at my dog and other people's dogs, I don't think dogs work very hard anymore. So I've been working pretty hard. And maybe like a mule, but not quite. I mean, it's not physical labor. But it's long hours, not really strenuous, just mentally repetitious, boring. So, you know, the usual stuff when it comes to working life. But in the meantime, what have I been up to? Well, if you've noticed my blog, I've published I think like 2 blogs in the meantime since then. Both of them were rather old, mostly finished years ago. I just never finalized them. One of them was about it was a bit comical, but also, you know, somewhat earnest. Little blog post about how Hegel uses his philosophical terminology, using everyday words and trying to keep close to the everyday meanings of things, even though he also deepens it and expands on it, shows it implicitly more concrete than it is in its regular usage. The other one was what was the other one? I can't remember. Yes, on comedy and finitude, which was done about last year, really, and I just never got around to finishing it up. And there's one viewer. Hello. If you experience any issues, let me know. If the audio sounds fine or bad, or video looks fine or bad, let me know. So anyways, I was just talking about how little I've done in the last couple months. Well, not a couple months, but it's been probably in the last year, really, because I haven't had any time. I've been working a hell of a lot. And it's about to go down. September is usually where the season for the job that I'm doing ends. Fruit season's over. So, you know, not only hours will go down, but job will hopefully, you know, be off rather soon, because my unemployment check is going to be pretty fat. But anyways, how y'all doing? To get to contemporary issues, well, I mean, in the interim of the last videos, we've had Joe Biden, you know, be the de facto nominee for the Democratic Party. Lots of people going on about, well, now, Trump is a real danger. He's a real fascist. We got to do something about it. We all got to rally behind Biden because, at least, with Biden we can do something. I don't know how people get that idea, because under no normal circumstances has there been the case that any centrist Democrat has been a way for the left to ever accomplish anything, ever. Actually, Aremi Ose Frimpong posted a couple of weeks back about the irony about how under Republican or openly racist presidents is when a lot of improvements are made for particularly black people and occasionally working class people. And for the most part, when it's not that, usually we just get fucked by the Democrats and Republicans alike. So not only that, we all should be aware at least that Biden is not exactly fully mentally there, so he's not exactly going to be the president. So if you want Kamala Harris as president and you think you're going to butt your left, you're kind of crazy. So who would I prefer to win? Well, I prefer not to play the game, but we have to play the game, but it's a game in which it's a losing game. So as far as I'm sorry I keep saying so much. So try to get out of that habit. Wow, dog. Whoa. Holy shit. That was a really thick spider web. Jesus Christ. What are you doing? Get over here. Well, sorry about that. To get back to what I was saying, Kamala Harris is going to be de facto the president. Joe Biden is just going to be a figurehead. And it's not really a case of a win-win or a lose-lose or a win-lose. It's just kind of lose-lose. Well, it is a lose-lose for the left if, you consider yourself left, and if you have any left aspirations. Shit ain't going to happen under any of these presidents in their parties. The only thing that's going to accomplish anything really is if there is some external movements that create pressure and bring power to bear on these political institutions. Otherwise, everything's going to keep going the same. Everything's just going to keep getting worse. And I see no real immediate positivities in the future. So as far as that goes, I don't really feel like it very much engaged with the next presidential election. I'm about as engaged as when Obama ran, which a lot of people liked Obama, and I never did. I wasn't even a leftist back then in an explicit sense. My leftism was mostly with my knowledge of Chomsky and the Zeitgeist movement, and they didn't really consider themselves a left. They didn't call themselves leftists back then, from what I knew. So things are gonna get worse. They can only get worse. I don't expect them to get any better. They don't promise to get any better. And people aren't really demanding any better. And unless people actually get out into the streets and demand something better, shit ain't gonna happen. I mean, just look at the current, attempts to defund the police, reform the police, or whatever. Those protests were inspiring for a moment, and then you realize these people have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to spend their energy such that it will actually accomplish anything. Besides, the few places where they've defunded the police by a significant amount, but nonetheless, what that will actually mean is entirely unclear. Defunding, say, like, what was it that in Seattle they defunded it by 50% or something? Sorry. Um, whether that ends up meaning anything is up to the question of what are they going to do with that money, and second is what are they going to do with the police force that remains. I mean, sure, you cut it in half, but if it's still a band of thugs, it's a band of thugs. You've changed nothing but the size of the gang, but the gang's still there. So that's that. Get over here. Jesus Christ. Come into the fields, out into nature, and you just get overwhelmed by bugs. And there's a fat dog. Anyways, other than that, I've sort of just been occasionally reading artworks, and now I'm like looking at some artworks, watching some stuff. I don't think I talked about it last time. Where I think I did. I read two. I don't know if you would call them novels. I don't think they're novels. They're not. They're not very long, actually. I read two fantasy, you would call them, I suppose, stories. First one was Lilith by George MacDonald, which is, in my opinion, really good. The second one is A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay, which is also really good. Although, and I intended to write something about both of those because they really got me thinking, and they are really great examples about how aesthetic determinations are made in a great piece of art. Because you read those, or you encounter something like that, and you really get the sense of how unified that piece is, and how the artist was very much aware of how to use imagery, how to use symbolism, how to use sound, how to use all these other tools of the sensuous arsenal to convey to you the kinds of things and concepts that they wanted to convey, which is the sign of mastery. In art, the motto obviously is it's a cliche, but it's show, don't tell. The less you have to verbally explain, the better things are. So that's something really interesting. I think that both of those stories are very good at that. One of them is a Christian allegory, the other one is a Gnostic allegory. And I think that for the average person, the second one, A Voyage to Arcturus, would actually be far more interesting than, say, Lilith is. Lilith is interesting in a very abstract, philosophical way. You can tell that George MacDonald was a theologian. Whereas A Voyage to Arcturus is far less reliant on explicit philosophy and theology, and is far more capable of showing through the imagery described what concepts it wants you to understand. So it's a really trippy book too. It's hard to describe. Most people who read it don't really understand it. They find it very bizarre. They find it very trippy. They find it hard to follow, which to me is just like, I don't know why people find it hard to follow, but I mean, I suppose it's above their heads, even though to me it was a rather straightforward book, and only in some places was I thinking, what the hell's going on? and mostly that was because I was not fully awake, because I was listening to it mostly while I was falling asleep. So there's that, and I've listened to it about 3 times over since my first listening, because it's that good. Very interesting book. And then recently I rewatched with a friend of mine and an anime called The Big O, which I thought was a decent commercial attempt at, making a commercially viable artwork. So that was interesting. It got me thinking of a few things which were interesting in the entire show, and I was started to write about that. And then I didn't finish that because I've had some time, but whenever I have the time, I'm just more interested in other things. So I haven't really had the interest to go back and finish the whole planned analysis essay on that. Recently, I started reading a manga. I got a tablet. I didn't have a tablet before. I mostly just had desktop computers and laptops, and never saw the point of getting a tablet until recently, where I got kind of curious of like, well, are these actually really good for reading text, reading PDFs, reading, well, looking at images and watching videos. So after reading some reviews and examples of stuff, I decided to actually go and get one. And so I got myself a Galaxy Tab A. And boy, those things are really good for images. They're also good for text. They're very nice for reading. But they are not very nice for handling. I don't know how people deal with those all day, especially without a case, because those things are super uncomfortable to hold for any extended length of time. But because it's a tablet and because it's so nicely fit for images, I actually started reading Berserk, which is a manga, and about 1/3 of the way, I think, a bit less than 1/3 of the way if you just count it chapter-wise. But if you have any interest in manga or anime, you've probably definitely heard of Berserk. And if you haven't, then you probably aren't the kind of person who might be interested in Berserk. It's very Japanese-y. It's got a very Japanese flair. Obviously, it's a anime style, but it's also very Western flavor to it, which is interesting because the art is visually top-notch. The author's name is Kentaro Miura, and boy, almost every single frame of that is something you can look at for quite a while. It's very detailed. He's a master of just black and white landscapes, everything really. The early stuff, it starts out a bit rough. Every once in a while you have some kind of strange looking perspectives on, specifically on human anatomy, but beyond those, it's fantastic. I mean, you would say it's definitely gorgeous. Just not just it's that kind of realism that is realistic where it has to be, and not realistic where it doesn't have to be. And so there's a lot of it's fantasy. It's a lot of fantasy elements, a lot of metaphysical elements, and it's just a really good story, which you wouldn't expect out of that medium. Not because the medium's incapable, rather, I mean, like Berserk and a few others are the examples that obviously you can make great pieces of aesthetic, meaningful art in the medium. And there never should be any reason for why not. but they're the few that actually do it. Hello, viewer. So, what else? I've had a lot of stuff in my mind lately, and all of a sudden I suddenly turn on the screen. I can't think of what the heck I wanted to say. Oh, some kind of interesting personal news, I suppose. Next month I'm turning 30, which I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. It sort of doesn't matter to me, and then some moments it just kind of hits you a little bit, and you're like, wow, yeah, it's about a bit more than 1/3 of your life, and what have I done? Where am I going? Where am I at? That's sort of existential questions come up, right? But I had hoped at least that someone as a meaningful joke I would have I would actually have a party, so to say, for my 30th birthday, because really I've never celebrated any birthday before, or rather, really, I don't care to celebrate any of the other birthdays after. There was a joke that came out of the internet from a manga. I don't even know which one, but it's a joke that started with 4chan. And, it was that there was some supposed fake legend that if you turn 30 and you're a virgin still, you gain wizard powers. So I had hoped to on my 30th throw a wizard themed party, because I'm still going to be a virgin by the time I'm 30, and I don't particularly care about that. I just find it funny, and it would have been a funny joke between my friends and I. All my friends know about the joke, and I probably would have posted some stuff on Twitter, and maybe posted a picture or two, just as some fun memories. But due to the COVID crisis, that ain't happening. So there goes that. I'm definitely not going to be doing much of anything to celebrate that day, honestly. I might take the day off from work, but to do what? I don't know, because there's really nothing for me to do. There's nowhere for me to go. There's no one for me to see. It was called Hey Hyperion. Yeah, I just knew it was a meme on 4chan since forever. But yeah, so I might take the day off from work and do God knows what. I would have liked to go somewhere, but my car is not exactly in the greatest shape, so I don't trust it to go very far. So I don't really want to go out somewhere far, like the coast, or go to a park or a national park. So that's unfortunate. I suppose I might go buy a couple drinks, buy myself, God, I can't even remember what the hell I like. Hard cider, I like hard cider. But beyond that, I mean, that's not really a fun thing to do. I mean, to me, that's just kind of like a tasty drink. I don't really even care about the buzz part. It's not interesting to me. Beyond that, all my friends are unfortunately all across the globe. And I'm an uncultured swine, Jin. Oh, you have 6 years to go, huh? I consider myself relatively uncultured compared to my friend Hyperion and my friend Josh Shao. Well, Josh Shao is less cultured than me in philosophy and novels, and then I'm less cultured than Hyperion in novels and music, and then less cultured than Josh in music as well. So there's a lot of culture to still be assimilated. And I mean, I'm not an elitist about culture, honestly. There's actually quite a few things that I'd like to write about just the high cultured part of low culture, um, in which a lot of things that people consider low culture, obviously not. Well, they obviously are, but they also are not. There's a way to interpret them, and there's a way to consume them in a way such that they can be raised to a higher level of meaning. Because there is a higher level of meaning in them. There's a higher level of value. There's some popular stuff that you can just look at and forget, and then there's some popular stuff which is just kind of sticks with you because it just is better. It really is of a higher quality and caliber of art than just low art. I mean, an example of that I think is Tool. Tool is not very highly complex music. I mean, it is and it isn't. Uh, Content-wise, it's not really very complex. It's just basic spirituality, but it's packaged in such a way that it's nice and it's aesthetically good for what it is. And and so long as you take it for what it is, um, it has its own little range. Stepping into the high levels of art. Less so, something like Tool is that way. I think something like The Police is on the lower spectrum of that, but also, steps into the capital A art domain. You know, yeah, weird dichotomy. Well, I don't know. It's not so weird to me because they sound good. So and I think that's what makes them accessible. They sound good. Uh, at some points, their lyrics are very complex, and the themes are complex. And if you're not very well aware of them, it just sounds a bit like nonsense, but very interesting nonsense nonetheless. So like what is it? 46 and 2 is it? If you don't know about Jung, if you don't know about like even some of the more weird stuff about Jung's theories, that song makes completely no sense. But even when you don't know about it, it sounds pretty damn good. Just it flows very well lyrically. It flows very well, instrumentally. Uh, so yeah. So I'm not so surprised that that mix goes well. It's still a very accessible complexity, as opposed to a very abstract complexity of something like some very weird time signatures that are not immediately aesthetically pleasing, and they only become pleasing with the training of your ears and an appreciation for that complexity. Be quiet. Shh. Oh no, God. Sorry about that. Hands becoming a bit cramped with holding my phone for a bit too long. But yeah, I'd like to write something about that, particularly because my main way to come at that is musically, yeah, but not with like examples like Tools. Mostly like I would use examples like The Police. There's some stuff from Madonna which I think is very deep and very nice. Capital A art, even if it's on the music that I'd like to say, where it's accessible, but it's also very deep. Stuff about pop music. I mean, even the stuff that's just like hot garbage has little ring of truth to it that I think is part of what makes it lastingly appealing to people. So eventually I'll write something on that. It's on the back burner. It's my to-do list of things. Obviously, like Hyperion knows this, Josh knows this. Like, I'm not even an anime fanatic. I don't really spend my time. I'm not an otaku. I'm not obsessive about it. But it's one of the mediums that I still, more than anything, come back to just because like I enjoy it. And it's also the only one that unfortunately has anything that even comes close to artistic value as opposed to Western cartoons. Um, no, no value in a lasting sense for almost everything I've ever seen. Whereas you get into anime and like there's at least some people who attempt to put something deep. Maybe you can chalk that to Japanese people just being a highly metaphysical people. Eastern people are highly metaphysical people. Indian people are highly metaphysical, and so the fact that they find it so easy to intertwine these high-minded metaphysical ideas into all of their even more mundane artworks, um, and just entertainment pieces. Really, it's hard to call them artworks for the most part. Um, Perhaps it's not that surprising. But yeah, I mean, like Josh, I'm not a weeb. I mean, like, have you met Space? Uh, I mean, well, Space isn't a weeb. Space just likes anime. So does what's his name, El Cubano. Oh yeah, I mean, like, actual weebs are annoying, quite frankly. Uh, well, Space isn't a weeb. He likes anime, but Space is just like an innocent boy, really. Like, the movies that we watch with Space are just like little kid movies, and we're like, Space, like it's kind of cute that you're showing that these are the things that you want to watch. And they're kind of like they're not even movies that Space isn't a pedophile. Yeah, and Jack Slaps isn't a weeb either. He just likes trash anime, but he knows it. Yeah, I think that song is trash, honestly. But a lot of people like it. I mean, it's catchy. It's a catchy song, but content-wise, it's pretty trash. It's a low-level reference, and eh. Oh, that one's by Andy Summers, I think. He's the guy who really liked to do He was the experimental guy in the band. So of course you would like that song, Josh. It's like it's weird, but I like it too. Uh, just because it's one of those songs that I think is art. He put it sounds what it means, and what it says definitely goes along with what it means and how it sounds. But yeah, I like Andy Summers' guitar playing. It's interesting. That's all I can really say about it. I don't have any lexicon to describe the way he plays, other than it's interesting, it's weird, and it's part of what made The Police any good. It's why Sting hasn't really had a hit after. That, and I also like their drummer, Stuart Copeland. Even though he is a CIA plant, he has literally his dad was fucking CIA. Asia, my voice is very calming. Thank you. Must be because I'm a very calm person. Some people have told me I would do, but I don't have a setup for using my good mic that captures the whole range of my voice's quality, so that you can hear every little rasp. The band Yes, I've heard of Yes, and I've listened to some songs by Yes, but I have no idea, like off the top of my head, of any titles. Like Hyperion, were you here when I started talking about, Oh, well, yeah, you were. I don't know how, like, when you came in, if you came in like just then when you mentioned what that meme was from, the wizard one, or I was talking about how I'm gonna be 30 in about 40 days. 40 days, yeah, about 40 days, 30 something days. You know how, like, some days you just get that feeling of loneliness, honestly. Like, I talked with Tree about that the other day. Luckily, he was able to get on. And since I've been reading Berserk, yeah, I know. I don't know how this stupid thing works. It sucks that it doesn't give notifications. But I was actually talking to, since I started reading Berserk, and I'm about probably a bit more than 1/4 through. It's one of his favorite mangas, favorite pieces of artwork, really, and I can definitely see why it's very good. And we just got talking about the metaphysics of that, and I was reading up on it. You would like Berserk, Hyperion. Miura is totally into Jung, totally into esoteric stuff, and so there's actually quite a few esoteric references to alchemical stuff, to spiritual stuff, and he uses the correct lexicon. He uses the correct lexicon for things, and whenever I see those references, I definitely smile, because they're very meaningful. I mean, like, not only are they meaningful, like, just because our history, but it's meaningful also in the sense just like it's meaningful in the story. It's explained well enough in the story. Yeah, it's still ongoing, and the fear is that he won't finish it before he dies, because he's gotten ever so much slower the longer time goes on. And I'm pretty sure that the reason is because he no longer is as inspired, and so he's kind of lost the vision, and he's taking his sweet time, just kind of waiting around to see how the story itself ends for him, because he doesn't know it either. A lot of people go like, why is he taking so long? Why is he taking so long? And I think it's pretty damn obvious that at a certain point things start slowing down, because the vision started to fade, and and the more and more and the world has become more and more concrete, where he has less avenues to move in various directions, and everyone has the intimations of where things are going and where things have to end, but the execution is what he's being like really good at, to such a point where tone and point of purpose, like 3 times already. And it seems that in the latest stuff, it's going to shift yet again. And I mean, that's a very hard one to pull off, just for anything, really. You know, imagine you start a story where it's a murder mystery, and then it turns into like a metaphysical, I don't know, enlightenment story, and then it turns into something else, and it's just like, the fuck. But nonetheless, you know, he makes it work, uh, and it's admirable, you know. And I haven't even read that much, honestly, and like I love it. I'm only about about one bit less than a third, and you know, I already feel attached to the characters. You know, stuff happens to them. I've already got the whole story spoiled, honestly. But spoilers don't ruin anything for me, because like when you see it in detail, but you know, just knowing what's gonna happen, you know, like certain things just kind of like makes me feel really sad. It makes me feel excited. It's very interesting. And I obviously want to write something about it. I mean, I just finished the Eclipse, and I want to write something about it. Brighten up the screen. Hopefully that'll help. Yeah, other than that, music. I've been trying to listen to music again, but I don't know. Uh, like, I've just kind of like not been in the mood for anything. I mean, I got in the mood for, I randomly listened to, and that got like hooked onto my brain, and I just kept listening to that the entire week on my drive to work. And I don't know, I think there's probably a personal reason behind that, in which like the song mentions, you know, the 21st night of September, which is the day before I was born. I was born on the 22nd. You know, maybe I have some emotional attachments to that. It's also just a catchy song. I mean, it's good. I mean, updates on my personal life for anybody who cares is, if you watched the last live stream, you knew that I was homeless about 2.5 months ago. The very first night of September. And anyways, it seems that at the end of September, I'm gonna be losing the place where I'm at, and I might be homeless again. And so, obviously that stuff weighs on my mind. Because in a way, it's not that I can't afford anywhere to stay, but rather it's just, I don't know, the feeling of disappointment, you could say it's probably a bit of depression too, of just like not having life be controllable. You know, feeling just out of your element no matter what. You know, I could get a place, but it's gonna cost me a lot of money. And you know, rent-wise, that's like about, I don't know, 800 would be a steal for the current moment. The more likelihood is $900 a month sunk, you know, on rent and paying bills and whatnot. Because currently I'm not just me, you know, it's me and my parents and my second. She shouldn't work, like she's not in the state to do so, but you know, she's going to work and bearing through the immense pain just to get a few bucks, because you know, she's not even getting Social Security anymore, because some stupid government paper fuck up, which still has not been fixed. And so that kind of weighs on my mind. That's definitely depressing. Another thing is that, you know, even though I'd like to get a place, it's the price problem. I have a bit of money, quite a bit of money actually, but that we're paying for, you know, $900 of rent, plus my own expenses, plus the occasional, like, you know, having to help my family out with their expenses, and you know, all that money that I have saved up, hoping to, you know, put that to a good, like buying a terrain, or you know, getting a down payment for a house, so that I because buying a house right now is literally, and paying a mortgage is literally cheaper than renting, quite cheaper than renting, like $300 cheaper. That I would rather do that than waste my money renting. But you know, if I'm forced to go and get a place because I'm gonna be homeless, that's all that money and time and effort, and all the money that I've saved up in 3 years is gonna go like that. So that's definitely a disappointing prospect. Another disappointing thing is that my dog has not been living with me, and my dog is being very depressed. And you know, that definitely weighs on me. I mean, I love him, and I want him with me. But you know, I could live without him if I knew that he was okay and happy. But currently, he's not. And I don't really see how I could get an arrangement in which, you know, he would be. So that definitely weighs on my mind. And I say that I'm probably a bit depressed because I've stopped caring for myself more and more in the last couple months. And that's usually a sign of like me just kind of going into one of my depressive moods. So that sucks. And I'm trying to do my best to, you know, just keep out of it, to get my mind out of it, and just do something positive. But you know, literally everything seems to be out of reach for now. Let me move a bit into the light, because I'd like to do some projects of you know, some artistic merit of sort. Just, you know, get creativity flowing. But I literally have nothing. I mean, I could afford all the equipment that I need and all the things that I need, but I have nowhere to keep them. I have nowhere to use them. I mean, it's a sort of annoying contradiction, you might say. So yeah, I was talking with Tree about that last week, and about how much it sucks that, you know, all of my friends are literally across the world from me, and loneliness does get to you sometimes. I love his little face. Anyways, what have you guys been up to, Josh? Reading any poetry lately? You and Hyperion. And for anybody else who's watching, I mean, if you have any questions, any topics you'd like me to opine on, feel free to ask. I'll probably just stream for as long as you all want to chat. Yeah, I want to read more poetry. Like, just because it's nice. Frankly, I want to read like all the classics. Honestly, I started reading. Well, I reread Dante's Divine Comedy last year. Actually, no, it wasn't even last year. It was the year before that. So my poetry teacher's friends. He hates William Blake. Well, like, I can get like some, like, not liking some of Blake's poems, because, like, I mean, it's his own esoteric mythology. But I mean, like, there's there's some damn good stuff from William Blake that's just like perfect. How you could not like it, I don't know. Maybe, maybe an atheist would hate it just because, they hate God and they're like, oh, well, this is religious mumbo. Even then, I mean, I think plenty of atheists like William Blake's stuff insofar as, they don't have to. Yeah, so I read, it was like almost 2 years ago that I reread The Inferno, and then I stopped at the beginning of Purgatory, and I want to go and read it all the way through, because the first time that I read Divine Comedy, I did not read all the way through Paradise. I only read Hell and Purgatory, and I think probably the reason I didn't read it is because I found it quite boring, and I didn't know any of the philosophy that was being referenced. But now I do. I know quite a bit of it. So I think I would probably enjoy that book a hell of a lot more than I did last time. I'm less fascinated by look at all the gruesome things happening, and I'm more fascinated by the ideas being played out and the questions being put forth. Because, the Divine Comedy is so fucking good. Even in translation, it is so good. And I probably want to get like a couple of translations, because I have like an old one, and there's been quite a few translations afterwards, which are very different styles. So there's styles that try to keep the rhyming scheme. There's styles that try to keep to the content. I try to read the original, and I guess since I know Spanish, it's not so hard. Like, it's not completely unintelligible, and it certainly reads with a very different quality than any translation that you would get. The third rhyme scheme is very, very noticeable and interesting, which I had not known about until like 2 years ago. Yeah, I gotta read Paradiso, because I think it will probably be my favorite too. Just because of what I read in secondary literature now, like most of what it's going to be about. I mean, I'd like to eventually read the Aeneid, just because it was such a big one. What I want to read, like once we have time, is like we should read through Hegel's lectures on the history of philosophy. I think we would all I've seen like some passages quoted recently in the Hegel study group of people going like, hey, what about this thing Hegel said? I did not know, mainly because, well, obviously I haven't read it, and I haven't read any secondary literature on it. I mean, stuff like where Hegel says that the Neoplatonists fully understood spirit, they just didn't grasp the concept. And people are like, what? And so that sounds the concrete reasoning behind that very close to the way the concept works in Neoplatonism, from what very, very little I've encountered. But how that, whether they made that explicit. Bernini, the sculptor. Yeah, I don't think there's been anyone better than Bernini. Which makes me think I should get one of those, you know, one of those like art anthologies and catalogs. I don't know who Monteverdi is, uh, which, yeah, makes me uncultured. Like, I want to get one of those, like, ancient art all the way to modern art collections of anthologies of just, like, catalogs, and just use that, and I'd like to just kind of do my own philosophy of art reconstruction, like reading through one of those, and that would be super interesting. It would also probably help arrange certain things. Oh, it's musicians, so obviously I wouldn't know anything. Oh yeah, I did have some thoughts about music. That was one of the recent things that I wrote about in the last couple months. And before that, the main reason was that there's this whole weird website based on these. It's not based on, but it's sort of an exposition of this French composer and music theoretician whose name I cannot remember right now. But anyways, the site's called Music Norvatory, and it's interesting in that it's supposed to be a build-up of the theory of music, which is also generative. Now I was going to say based on the French guy's theory, but it's not really based on it. It is his theory, but it's this theory, you know, put forth in the fragments of student notes and you know, what they could reconstruct of it. And it's run by autists. I don't know if the website's back or not. Do you remember that the guy deleted it? Because I wrote my blog, and he thought that it was better that the world did not know about such a theory than that some uncultured swine like me put out false opinions about it. So he had a fit and like shut down most of the pages on the site, as far as I know, if not deleted it. But anyways, that whole idea has inspired me to try to begin formulating my own way to build up a theory of music in a Hegelian style. And had a bit of fun with that, you know, had a bit of fun discussing with Josh and Hyperion about rhythm. And I think we had something, but you know, in order to be sure of that, really, I think I ultimately have to like delve very deeply into music theory. And I just haven't had the time, and my interests are not currently fully on it. So there's that. I think I'll be far more interested if I ever pick up a potential instrument, because then, you know, you kind of had to learn music theory to get around to playing or at least reading music, because it's still Chinese to me. I see a music sheet and I have no idea what it fucking says if I don't look up things, and I don't remember. You did try to teach me, but I mean, it's the kind of thing in which, like, it's like, hey, well, it's like anything. If you don't constantly use it, you forget it. So, you know, like, technically, most of music theory, you know, you can learn it like under an hour. It's not that much content, but it's the fact is, you got to remember it. So, you know, if you're not using it, you don't remember it. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things where we disagreed with them about. The idea of fixing, music pieces by, which are masterpieces, as if there's anything wrong with them. I mean, like, I can understand, saying, oh well, you need to fix this in this one song because like the key is off. There's an off key here, which clearly sounds wrong. I mean, it's like when I was listening to a bunch of covers, for example, of Earth, Wind, and Fire last week, and in some of them you're like, well, this is wrong, but it's wrong in a very obvious way. Like it's wrong in the sense like this person just doesn't hit the keys right. It's wrong in the sense of just like the tone and just doesn't go with the lyrics and the content. It's wrong in the sense of, uh, yeah, just technical stuff. Like it's never wrong in the sense of just like, well, uh, that according to some sort of rules, this shouldn't go there. You can hear the wrongness of these pieces. You don't have to like think about it. You don't have to go into anything like that. It sounds good or it doesn't. And yes, some covers are better than the originals by far. And there's some stuff where it sounds wrong, and then you bear with it and you realize it's not wrong, that it's on purpose, and that's how it's supposed to sound like, and that once you get into the groove of it, it sounds fine. It sounds perfectly fine. It just sounded weird at the beginning because you're not in the logic of it. And actually, I was listening to something earlier. I was listening to a jazz cover of Earth, Wind, and Fire, um, which was mainly instrumental with the saxophone taking over the role of the lyrics, and I was somewhat pleased uh, to preempt some notes that came in the song, and that sort of just kind of was a confirmation for me of like, no, there really is a logical flow to these things. There's certain things that follow from note to note, uh, and you can tell. And it's not that there isn't one way that they follow, but there are certain things that make more sense to follow from certain aspects of a song than other things. Oh no, what? Oh, okay. Uh, so yeah, I was also listening to yeah, I was also listening to some covers by not by but of Tool, and most people cannot do it. Like either they cannot do the instrumentals, or their choice of instrumentals are worse, or they simplify it because they can't play the complexity, or they choose a completely wrong instrument for it and it just doesn't sound good at all. It doesn't go with the theme of the song, or their vocals suck shit. So there's not a lot of covers of Tool songs out there, mostly because of that. They're amazingly a hard cover, a hard band cover. Uh, some live bands, and then some home studio covers, and they're just, yeah. So yeah, music's been on my mind. It's sort of a seasonal thing. I like music, and there's always music in my head. It seems, and yet I don't feel like listening to music very much, except for like I have these like. There's times where I go months listening, and then Yeah, that's one of the things that I thought about. Like I was thinking about when I was listening to mostly the covers by of Earth, Wind, and Fire. A lot of them don't sound different enough, and and so it's just the song but worse. It's the song without the people who made the song, and yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of covers, and the few ones that I liked quite a bit were very different. Like the jazz one is different enough that it's had its own style, and it interjected its own solos into it, which weren't in the original song, and I thought that was really good. I don't know if I like jazz. I can't tell you that I like free jazz from what you've had me listen to. Um, I like what they call smooth jazz, and I like saxophones. Like I really like saxophone, the sound of the saxophone, jazz or otherwise. Um, Kind of like a harmonic, where I really like to listen to them, and so saxophone is one of those things that I really really like. Harmonica is also. It used to be that I really liked the violin mostly, but I don't know. I don't think the violin is that interesting anymore. It's a shame that brass instruments have fallen out of favor. I agree. It's kind of weird because they used to be all over the place. You know, suppose everything died with disco uh, and funk. A lot of people died with this because of disco too. Yeah. Actually, speaking of jazz, I listened to a Love Supreme last week. Honestly, I wasn't feeling it. Like, I mean, I liked the beginning parts, and then like most of the album just felt like, I don't know. It didn't catch my attention, and I just kind of put it into the background and did something else. I'm a very moody person when it comes to music. Like, if I'm not feeling it that day, I just don't. I don't really appreciate it. It's just like how when you had me listen to Tool for the first times, Hyperion. I wasn't really into it. I wasn't really in the mood for it. So it took about what was it? It took like 3 years for me to go back and say, hey, what about Tool? And I started listening to it, and I liked it. Sure, I'll listen to more John Coltrane. What are you doing? Start with Blue Train, huh? Whoa. Seeing something a little bit weird in the sky. It's not a UFO, so don't get too excited. Huh. Oh, it's the moon. Jesus Christ. No, it's the moon. It's, I think we've had like a fire or some really big fires recently this week. And so for like the last 3 days, it has literally been just a gray, flat haze over the sky. And since I get out of work like really, really late, I just go home and whatever. And so I haven't looked at the sky at all. But like literally, it's just a solid blanket of gray all day with a very noticeable haze. You probably can't see more than a couple miles. And right now it's so thick that the moon is barely, like, occasionally peeking out of the moving clouds. And it looked bizarre to me because I didn't realize that it was all the smoke and clouds. Yeah, seeing a UFO would have been too good. So Josh, I've seen you responding to Iremy on Twitter about some things about the upcoming election. What do you think? Would it be better for Biden to win or for Trump to win? I mean, long before you came in, I was talking about that to nobody. People who listen later will hear it again. About how I'm kind of in agreement with Iremy that as far as it goes, it's not that it's better for Trump to win or for Biden to win, really. I think, Iremy is a bit too hopeful with the idea that, Trump remaining will somewhat galvanize us. I think really all that this has shown is quite the opposite. That rather than galvanize the left, all it has done is galvanize the middle, and the left has, under the pretense of being afraid of fascism, bent over again, as they have always done. And so I don't think Trump winning is going to be good in increasing, left activism or anything, or increasing class consciousness or anything. I think for the most part, Trump winning or Biden winning is, on that matter, inconsequential. It doesn't lead anything. It doesn't lead to anywhere. So yeah, I think that as far as the election goes, if you're a quote-unquote leftist, there's really nothing for you to be looking forward to or looking against. I mean, I think if there's any hope for the left, it's got to be an extra institutional movement, which would obviously be a real movement, which has not begun in and through the political parties. And this alone would put pressure for for the political parties that exist, and also the possibility of a new party. Without that, it's nothing. It's going to be the same old, same old. So honestly, I don't care. I probably won't vote. I live in California, so my vote fucking doesn't matter. It's a Democrat state, anyways. And there's nobody worth shit running for lower level offices that I give a shit to vote about. So yeah, I'm not gonna focus on the election or anything. It makes no difference to me. Obviously, existentially, it makes a difference, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I have a detached view of things, where I don't lose my head, even if it's stuff that's personal. Like, for example, like there are people who are just voting for a Democrat because they're like, they're cutting Medicare. My mom's one of those people. My sister's one of those people, and I don't want them to die. Go ahead. I mean, that's as good a reason as anything. Sure, yeah. It's not a good enough reason for me. You know, because then people go like, oh, well, you voted for them. It's like it's on you. I think in a way, like George Carlin was right in which he said, it's people blame the ones who don't vote. Yeah, Hegel is super political, super political. But yeah, focusing on Hegel is more important than politics for the moment in which you need to learn about Hegel. I mean, I think like what I'm kind of hoping for is to see Irami leave academia fully and just become the leader of a movement. Insofar as there is a movement. I mean, there's no point in me leaving academia, if there's nothing. But if a movement actually started gaining momentum, I would hope that Irami would leave the ivory tower, and I think that he totally would, because he seems like the kind of person that would, to get on the ground. What are you doing over there? Yeah, and hardly anybody listens to them either. I mean, like, which is a shame. I mean, Hegel and politics does go together. Look at Winfield, look at Irony. They're talking to Hegel, but concrete. They're talking about how that relates to what's going on right now, to the problems in which they're interested in which they're working with. And it's a very different strategy and different way of looking at things than say Marxism is. Marxism is just currently, because of its own abstract nature, just speaking in pure abstractions, revolution this, revolution that, and it's all just empty, sloganeering. Whereas someone like Irami and Winfield are talking about very concrete things, and they're trying to do something. They don't expect there to be the revolution. They want there to be a revolution, but they don't expect that it's going to happen anytime soon. And so the expectation is that you want to push things forward, but you also want to be realistic, and you don't want to just demand everything and in the end get nothing. So I understand that position, but I also think that there's a certain standpoint in which it's a bit too late for a lot of shit. It's a bit too late for thinking that there's going to be even a little bit of leeway in getting some of what you want and not getting all of what you want. You're gonna get nothing anyways. I mean, currently that's the problem, and they know that. I mean, Ireland's even talked about it. Yeah, Winfield's talked about like the two-party system itself is part of the problem. I mean, like that doesn't even go into the whole problems of that they rig their own elections. You know, that you can't actually get anywhere meaningful with those attempts. You know, how are you going to? You know, people going about how they're going to reform their Democratic Party. You know, we're going to push we can push the Democratic Party left. How? It's impossible. They don't want you to. The leaders don't want you to, and the electorate doesn't give a fuck. You know, the electorate doesn't give a fuck. You know, you're in the minority if you're the kind of person who wants to change. Most of the electorate is quite stupid. Uh, they don't care about concrete issues. If you explain to them concretely they care, and then you turn around and they're told something by the media, they're told something by the people who they quote unquote trust, and it goes all out the window. You know, and there it goes. You know, like forget about pushing the party left. We just gotta beat Donald Trump. We just gotta beat the Republicans. You know, they're the bad guys. You know, yeah, we're bad, but you know, we're not as bad. I mean, literally, that's the defense a lot of people make. You know, yeah, you know, the Democrats are garbage, and yes, you know, like they're not really democratic, and yes, you know, they're highly conservative, and they're basically just Republican light. Uh, but at least, you know, they say, but at least, you know, they're not as bad as the Republicans. You know, they're bad, but they're not as bad. Um, you know, I don't roll with that. To me, that's garbage. To me, if you think that way, you're an idiot, and you're part of the problem why this country is, or any country really, is garbage. You know, if you expect less from your leaders, if you demand less from your leaders, don't be surprised that, you know, they're just gonna fuck you, and they're gonna keep fucking you and fucking you and fucking you, and that's what they've always done. And you know, and when you sort of get tired, you say, you know, I don't want to get fucked anymore, and they're like, well, you know, good luck on that. You can come and vote to not get fucked, but you know, your vote doesn't matter. And at the point at which it does matter, the electorate doesn't matter. You know, they don't care. They'll rig the elections, and people, because they are so trusting of the media, and because they are so trusting of the people in power, won't ever question the legitimacy of any of the false and flawed elections. And you know, and so long as that's in place, nothing's going to change. Nothing. And there can't be a third party that doesn't draw away from Democrats and Republicans alike. You'd have to have a third party that can grab a significant chunk from both of them. And that's very, very hard to do because of the very, very stupid way that rhetoric works in this country. So I have no hopes politics-wise. I don't expect there to be any advance towards anything good. No, I don't vote for the lesser evil because I'm against evil, period. Um, and history shows that that kind of thinking is just a gradual slide towards evil. I mean, like, literally everything has been a vote for the lesser evil forever, you know. And everybody's like, we just got to vote for the lesser evil, you know. That's all we can do. Well, the lesser evil keeps getting more and more evil. A lot of what Trump accomplishes fascistically now was laid down by Obama. Why? Because Obama was himself just a fucking fascist. He just didn't talk like one, but he made all the laws like one. You know, did everything underhanded just like one. Oh, but you know, like people care more about presentation than the fact of reality. You know, at least you know, like Obama. You know, at least Obama was a cool guy. You know, he was eloquent. You know, that's you know, at least he didn't make us look bad in front of our neighbors. You know, Trump bad just because he's a moron. So you know, people like intelligent evil more than stupid evil. Whereas one of those is far more dangerous than the other. Not because it's not the case that say if Trump say got the Bolsonaro level of power that Bolsonaro got in Brazil. Obviously, yeah, Trump's going to do a hell of a lot of damage. But if you get a Trump after, say, an FDR, they're not going to do a lot of damage. But if you have a bunch of people who are slowly just setting up all those things necessary to do damage, they will. And yes, a lot of people, that means. Yeah, Trump was appealing to emotions. So do the Democrats. Democrats appeal to nothing but emotions too. Like Trump bad. Yeah, Trump bad. He said these mean things. He does mean things. That's just bad. It's a pathetic, disgusting state of affairs. But Mr. Mahmoud Hafnawi, you said you're more of a logic guy. Have you tried reading The Science of Logic yet? If so, what do you think? Because actually, I wasn't a logic guy when I got into Hegel. Logic was like far away from anything I'd ever been interested in. I always found it sort of banal and boring. And it's only after Hegel that I find logic interesting at all, and that is not because of like the formal aspect, or rational aspect of it. So, for example, I was talking about music earlier, about how there was that jazz version of a song that I was listening to, and that I preempted some of the notes that came after certain notes, and that was very interesting because that's sort of a confirmation that is a confirmation of the fact that there obviously is a logic to the aesthetic play of music, that there are some rules that are ongoing. Okay, I think that article on the Stanford Encyclopedia is quite awful, to be honest. I just don't think people... it's not their fault, it's just that it's a very difficult thing to explain without just having you read it. I wouldn't say it's the best place to start with Hegel. I'd say it's just, if you wanted to have a chance at being right from the get-go, that's your best shot of learning how to do it and therefore knowing how to understand. Um, all I can tell you is that I don't know. There's a certain thing that happens that eventually you either do it or you don't. Uh, it's like riding a bicycle, you know. Like you can't just get some things. You how would I say it? It's not even like riding a bicycle. Like if riding a bicycle and there wasn't like any safety training wheels, and you just got to keep trying. And you're gonna fail in a way that you don't even realize that you fail until, you know, much later. It's that kind of book where you will have interpretations. You will be super certain that they're right, and you'll leave it at that. You'll create a whole narrative for yourself about, you know, how this all revolves around this, and it's really all about this. And then, you know, when you go back to it, eventually there's a lot of stuff you miss, and that stuff isn't quite how you think it is, and that, you know, every time you think you've figured out how it works, at least at first, you're caught. Like I've talked about this before. I've written about it that when we did it, we had a lot of time, so we had plenty of time. Me and Hyperion. We read it with a group of people who had no idea what it was about, who had never read anything like that, and we just hammered our heads into it. And I specifically hammered my head into it for like dozens of hours a day. Well, not a day. It's only about a dozen hours a chapter. I was obsessed with it, and, you know, I just wanted to know exactly line by line what was happening. And so, you know, I made a lot of diagrams. I tried to make my own explanations to get how things were working, because I wanted to follow it. I wanted to make sure that, you know, I was building every little bit up. And somehow, you know, within 2 weeks, really within like about the first 3 days when we read the first chapter, I'd already gotten one of the key things out of it, which is how the transitions worked. And then in about 2 weeks later, it dawned on me how it actually did work. And I didn't have the full lexicon that I have now for describing how it works, but I did figure it out. And after that, it wasn't easy, because we still go back. You know, we went back, what was it, last year, and we read chapter 2 for a little bit. And we realized, and I realized, that some of the things that I had written about that missed so much. And so, you know, and we still had some questions about how certain transitions were working out and what things were happening at certain places. You know, like I think I felt that I've gotten like the something and other transition figured out like 5 or 6 times since I first read it. And I read that chapter like about 3 times fully, and about, I think, like 6 times in parts every once in a while. And every time I go back, I realize there's something that I did not fully understand. There's something that I misunderstood. There's an order of things that I missed. And I keep re-articulating it. I just kind of got a hang of how it works and how you can go about trying to unravel it. So it's doable, but I'm not going to pretend that it's doable in the way and as fast as I did it. You know, I'm an outlier, and I'm not a genius. I don't consider anybody is. An intuitive ease for it, I suppose, that you know, I was blessed with, if I can say that, uh, in a way. So I have my blogs on that. If you haven't read them, I don't know if they would be helpful or not. I think they're encyclopedia article or any other article that I've ever read, honestly, because I try to speak about how it works rather than like just about these weird lexicon things about sublations and determinate negations and negations of negations. That's all fine and dandy if you already know what those do and how they work. They're useless if you don't. This whole thing like, oh, Hegel's a three-part method. What good does that do you? Nothing. It never helped me. Never did anything for anyone I know. I mean, it just makes it's stuff that makes you feel that you understand it when you really don't. I mean, to describe to you the method in short, the method is literally just thinking of thinking. That's all it is. It's going through the work. Hegel says, being, pure being, it is immediate, it's unrelated, it's just empty, it's just an empty intuition, it is empty thought, it is an empty concept, it is that which we call nothing. And he says, well, nothing, well, it is, it's empty, it's indeterminate, all these other things, but insofar as it is being, it's no different than being, it is. And then you have this whole thing, and then you get becoming, and how does becoming work? Well, becoming works in being this movement of being to nothing, nothing to being. It's this thought movement. And how does this thought movement really work? Well, it works as the thinking of thinking. Being is just the immediate thought. You think it through, you reconceptualize it, recollect it as nothing. But then nothing, because it is recollected, because it is then immediate again, is being, because immediacy is being. That's what it is. That's what it means. And that's how you make these transitions in which you notice you're going from the surface level of a concept in which it appears the immediacy of being to the content of it, or rather the immediacy of immediacy, or the form of immediacy, and then the content of immediacy. And the contents and the form invert each other because they are each other. The form is the content is the form. Nothing is the content of being, but because it is the content, and the content is the only reality, it is the form. But the form of nothing is precisely that, because it is form. You get stuff like that, and everything works like that. Everything is just a reflection of a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. Going layer by layer by layer, building up and up and up. Literally, it's something fascinating about Hegel. He literally builds up from nothing. Nobody else does that. Nobody. There's not a single philosopher anywhere that, neither in the Western canon nor in the Eastern canon, not an Indian philosopher, not a Chinese philosopher, not a Japanese philosopher. No one ever does that. No one ever achieves that, in being able to literally begin with nothing but an empty thought, or really, which is also the thought of emptiness itself. Reflecting on that, turning into an object of cognition, then going right through that again, cognition of a cognition, and you just build up and up and up and up and up. And every level that you go, the name of the concept comes in based on the relationships of standard concepts. Why becoming after being nothing? Well, because that is precisely what becoming is. In standard lexicon, becoming is that state which is both being and not being. It is being and nothing. So anything that has this form of a unity of being and nothing is fit for being called becoming. Anything that is determinate, that is existent, that is a frozen unity of becoming, which is also the frozen unity of being and nothing, is fit to be called existence. And you move up and up and up and up. And once you get that, it's simple, and that's precisely why it's so hard. That it is such a simple thing that it has no other parts. Well, technically speaking, Hegel does start from nothing, because it's the same thing. Being and nothing are the exact same thing. So, technically speaking, the proper cognitive stance towards that is actually that it's immediacy. But the meaning of immediacy is precisely being and nothing. Well, you say conceptually equal, but they are literally the same. And this is all the way through the entire logic. Well, they are the same thing in the isness and essence. Like, literally, Hegel says essence is nothing but the movement of nothing to nothing. And being is nothing but the immediacy of all of this. Nothing is the negative immediate, being is the positive immediate, but they are literally the same thing because they just become they are each other. They always become each other. There is no escaping that. You know, the moment you have one positive, it immediately falls into the other. So I would and I do argue against that contention that they are different, because they are different insofar as the perspective concerns, but they are not different insofar as essence concerns. Essentially, they really are the same exact thing. Just how essence and appearance are essentially the same thing. You know, they are both essential. They both co-determine and constitute and are the determination of the real essence. But the real essence is something that is obviously beyond the concept of essence, and so it is the concept. It is the idea and all these other things. And obviously that goes into very, very deep minutiae, which I am not qualified to speak of because I haven't read those chapters. I haven't read those books yet. And God knows when I will actually read those books, honestly, because the way I work through the logic is like I'm obsessed with the details, and so I want to get through the details first before I get through the major forms first, which is the opposite of what most people do. Most people are more interested in getting to the general form first and then, you know, avoid the details. But I think that if you avoid the details, you miss out on a lot of the really, really deep, rich stuff, which is the most useful stuff, more than anything. I mean, look, I've only read the first 3 chapters of the Science of Logic. I've only read like the first 6 chapters of the Phenomenology of Spirit. I've only read like the first 150 pages of the Aesthetics, the first about 200 pages of the Philosophy of History. I haven't read that much. Like, really, like, I mean, ever since I started Hegel, I have not read that much. It's actually very little. It's the stuff that, you know, people go like, what? I read that in a semester. Well, yeah, you could read that in a semester, but you won't get what I got out of it. You know, my reading has been a very slow, methodical reading, and I have gotten a hell of a lot more out of it than anything I could have imagined. Well, of course it's not always nothing. Nothing is not always nothing either. I mean, like, I think there's probably a bit of misunderstanding going on in that we're speaking from different standpoints of process here. I mean, in the total process, the exact same thing. It doesn't matter. When you take the momentary process, of course they have to be different. I mean, that's precisely the whole point of them having a different determination made in the first place, and a different operation. You know, they are different. but essentially they're all the same. You know, in the total process, it's all one thing. You know, have I read Adorno? No, I have not read Adorno yet. Um, I don't know if I really want to bother with Adorno. Yes, I'm still interested in reading Adorno's aesthetics whenever I am in the mood for that. Yes, I do have an interest in aesthetics. I wouldn't say it's big, but I wouldn't say it's like a predominantly big thing. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I'm sort of I have seasonal interests, and so I just kind of move hither and thither through I'm into. You know, there's been times where I've been very much into like the philosophy of nature, and so I spend a year on that or a couple months on that. I was into math for a while, for like about 4 months. What was like a year and a half ago, and did a lot of writing on that. Never published anything. Still left it unfinished. I'll get back to it. So you know, I'm sort of in the phase right now of like not reading theory so much as applying what I have learned and making determinate shows of what that looks like. So you know, I'm more interested right now, in going through artworks and putting out an analysis, deploying the form of the Hegelian logic. You know, for the most part, the easiest thing is just to deploy the concepts and, you know, show how they appear. But I sort of want to, in as much as I can, deploy the logic itself within the works of art, to show that there is this kind of dynamic process in play in these artworks, such that the things that I've said about art in general show themselves in particular individual concreteness. So I haven't been reading anything about aesthetics really. I haven't read like Hegel's aesthetics, and so I haven't read anybody else's aesthetics either. I have this book that I bought. Well, you do an extensively aesthetic analysis of Plurman. I liked it. I mean, it's a very fun, very fun part of JoJo, but I did not think that there was anything. I did think there was a lot of meaningful stuff in part 4 and part 3. I haven't read the mangas at all, so I'm just kind of waiting for the anime season of like part 5 to come out, and then I know that after that the whole universe resets. But there is a lot of stuff that's philosophically interesting in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Not as interesting as other things. It's not as predominant as I would like it to be. But at the same time, some of the stuff is just genius. Like, you know, I assume that then you read my thing about the Golden Experiences ability and how that has interesting philosophical truth to it, even though Araki probably has no idea. I mean, on the Pillarman, there's probably something, but I would have to rewatch it. I mean, it's not that long of a rewatch, and I think the only episodes that probably would be relevant are the ones with, which is just one episode. Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna keep arguing the being nothing thing. I do start with nothing. Actually, I make an example explicitly about this in my blogs about how I think it would have been better if he had started with nothing, because it would have made it more clear how the method really works. Because in the transition of nothing to being, it hinges on a sleight of hand. And it's not just me saying it. It is a sleight of hand. Hegel recognizes it because he talks about how, from the standpoint of existence, nothing is a thought. It is an object of thought. Therefore, it is, and therefore it is being. That's not a valid transition in the logic. That cannot be a valid transition. That's not the way it actually works. It's not the way it can work. Otherwise, that whole movement is illegitimate. You can't hinge on existence to make that movement, yet he does. And the way that you should do it is rather just to the fact of immediacy. The fact that immediacy is, that's just what it is. That it is being. It's not anything else. There's nothing else to qualify. As a matter of fact, it's not even a qualification. It can't be. That you have to begin really to show by starting with the absence of thought itself, the absence of an object of thought, which then becomes itself its own object, turned with cognition. You become cognizant of your own uncognizance, and therefore it becomes immediate. Therefore you have being, and then you immediately fall right back into nothing for the exact same reason. So I would make a contention against the master right there, that he should have started with nothing, because I think it would have been because in the way that being to nothing works, it hides it, and because Hegel didn't want to talk about it too concretely, he didn't want to talk about cognition. But ultimately, you have to talk about cognition, because this whole thing happens in and through cognition, and is cognition itself. I mean, all these concepts are pure cognition itself. Being is immediate cognition. Nothing is immediate cognition. And what is nothing? It's the recognition of the absence of cognition. You try to think something immediate. Well, guess what? You can't think. There is nothing to think. There's no relations. There's nothing. There's nowhere to go. You don't think. And so thought thinks its own absence. Boom, being. So, the way you get to becoming is precisely that. So if you understand being and nothing, understand its cognition. Understand that immediate thought is non-thought. Immediate thought, being, is non-thought, nothing. It's not a thought at all. But precisely because but then being is the thought of a non-thought, if that makes sense. This is why I say beginning with nothing is better. Because at least with nothing, you begin and you say, okay, think immediately without an object. Because you cannot, to have an object is to have an opposition of consciousness. So, so you cannot begin with an object of consciousness. That's an opposition of consciousness. Of course, in logic, we also don't begin with an object of consciousness, because being is not, say, we don't begin with being as our object. We rather begin in the cognition of being. This is a hard thing about it. To get away from the opposition of consciousness, you have to realize that you're not thinking about these things. Well, I'm not saying you don't understand Hegel. I'm saying I don't care where Hegel starts. I care about what makes sense and what actually makes rational progression work. And the rational progression works as far as I've come to understand and find out, both through the text and through my own experience, that nothing is the one that actually works better. Was I ever a utopian, technocratic, anarcho-communist? Yeah, that was back in like Yeah, that was like long before you knew me. That was like back when I was in high school. Like that was like from about 15 to 18 when I was into the Zeitgeist movement. Yeah, but yeah, Ejindin, it's not a contention. Like, like, yes, Hegel begins with being. I don't care. I'm saying he should have begun with nothing. And that he should have done a way better job at explaining it. Because even though the way he does it makes perfect sense, it's not true. And he knew it was not true. Because he mentioned himself in the very first chapter that no, being isn't even indeterminate. Well, I don't know where you're getting that from, but I'm going purely by the logic. I mean, there's ways in which I can interpret what you're saying in a way that still fits in right with what I'm saying. Yeah. But anyways, we're going on in circles, and it's becoming a rather fruitless discussion on this point. So we'll leave it at seed that you have a better grasp of the texts as texts than I, but until I reach those points, I will. You don't think I understand Hegel? That's good for you. I don't think I understand Hegel either. I mean, I don't care to understand Hegel the man. I have no care whatsoever about what the fuck Hegel thought, what the fuck Hegel believed. Don't care. What I care about is, does what he say ring true? So, there's plenty of things in which I think Hegel's just wrong, in ways, but blatantly wrong nonetheless. And so I could not care less to stick to his words. Oh, I'm not saying that my opinion is the true opinion. I'm saying that I don't particularly care about the standpoint you're taking, right? Like, you're coming at this from a text point of view. And that's what I don't give a fuck about. Like, I 100% don't give a fuck about the letter. I care about the spirit. Yeah, I don't care about Hegel's view. Like, what, are you Hegel? I mean, are you inside Hegel's head? Are you Hegel the person? Do you have some kind of like intuitive cognition about what it is to be Hegel? No, you'll never know Hegel. Nobody does. I wouldn't say Hegel is vague. I would say Hegel is like super concrete. But Ejindin, I mean, you just have a different standpoint than I do. No, I wouldn't. I don't think that analogy works. And I never said I want to have an understanding of it. I care about the spirit. Sorry about that. So that analogy does not work because nutritional labels aren't about reasoning. Whereas, the reasoning of nutrition is not done by my head. The reasoning of nutrition is done by my gut. It's done by my body. It's done by, like, it doesn't matter what the fuck the nutrition label says. If it actually is or is not nutritious is based on how my body actually functions. So that's not a proper analogy. The proper analogy is really just purely a thought one. It's, do we cognize it or do we not cognize it? So, in regards to what we're talking about, being or nothing, you keep saying like, oh, but Hegel doesn't begin with nothing. Well, I don't care that he doesn't begin with nothing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how you cognize it. I'm talking about how it makes sense to cognize it. No, Mahmoud, I would not say that. Hegel is pretty precise and pretty clear, painstakingly so, to the point where the reason people think it's vague is because it is so precise. I mean, look, the analogy here is go and read some like highly technical physics article from a top journal. You won't understand it, but I don't think that you would dare say that it's because these people are being vague. You would say, oh, well, I just don't have the background on this. I don't have the technicality, the sophistication, the understanding to understand what they're saying. It sounds like gobbledygook to me, but I know it's not gobbledygook. The same way with Hegel. It's not gobbledygook, even if it seems like gobbledygook. And you can be assured of that because there are people who don't think it's gobbledygook, and they talk about it in pretty clear and precise ways, ways that are not fully true to what the intent is, or what the meaning actually is. Well, yeah, philosophy. It's a philosopher of philosophers. Also for laymen. I mean, do you know that? He basically formulated and taught his phenomenology, spirit, and science of logic by teaching high school students. What background is needed for Hegel? I don't think you need any background. Lots of cocaine, Zizek, I don't know. I didn't have that much background. None of my friends have that much background, honestly. So I don't think you need much. I mean, all you need is, do you want to learn Hegel? Do you want to bother putting the time to learn Hegel? That's about it. There's different interpretations, and that's up to you to read the text, find out what you think they mean, read other people's interpretations, see if you think those make more sense than yours, see if those makes more sense to you. I don't like Zizek, honestly. He's funny, he's entertaining, but as a writer and a theoretician, I think he's pretty, but you can read a lot of secondary literature, and it won't help you one bit. You have to read Hegel. You have to learn to read Hegel in your own way. Obviously, in a way that makes sense with the text, because there's a lot of people who read Hegel in their own way, and it makes no sense with text. And so, whatever they're interpreting is certainly not Hegel. Okay, someone gave you a letter trying to persuade you of something, and if what they are trying to communicate is important to you, you would want to make sure you understood what they were saying. If you want to understand truth, and if Hegel is truth in philosophy, you would want to understand it as best as you could to get to the truth. That is a simple point I'm making. Well, that's a pretty abstract point. I mean, who is going to disagree with that, right? But the contention is actually a concrete one, right? It's not just this abstraction. Obviously, I think that if you want to know the truth of things, you got to know the whole. But in this case, the contention is precisely that we're talking about different standpoints within the whole. How is that concrete? You're talking about a general point. I mean, you're literally talking about the exact same thing about how the concreteness This is as concrete as Hegel's explanation of the method at the end of the logic, which is, if you just explain it that way, people are like, so what's special about that? Well, of course, if you just say it, look, it's really technically the thinking of thinking. Well, yeah, so is everything else. I mean, so is all philosophy, right? Isn't that it? Then you're like, well, no. Well, then what's the contention? Well, the contention is everybody agrees with that basic abstraction, but we're talking about a concrete interpretation of a difference here. I mean, you're talking about a sense of right where you're getting a context of being a nothing in a much, much wider context than I'm talking about. And so, in the same way that you said, I'm not saying that you're saying anything false, the same way I think about what you're saying. You're not saying anything false, but you're also saying something rather irrelevant for the standpoint that I'm taking. I mean, if you're talking about being in nothing from the beginning of the logic, you're not talking about it from, say, being in nothing as it's talked about in the philosophy of religion, for example, or in the logic of essence. Oh my God, you're still on about this whole he doesn't begin with nothing thing. Okay, man, you hang up on like the most pointless things. I'm done with that discussion. Sorry, but that's just going circles around something that I utterly have no care for. Like I said, I don't care about what the fuck he does in the text. I care about what the actual cognition of the text is like. Which is how Hegel reads everybody else. He doesn't really care about what they say in their text. He cares about what they're doing. And don't be a Thrasymachus. I'd throw something back at you if I knew who to compare it to, but I don't know, maybe an analytic. Don't be an analytic. Because you're being an analytic right now, in which you're getting a hang up on a completely minute and utterly meaningless, pointless detail, which I wouldn't even argue. Like, whether people said it was being or nothing, I wouldn't even argue it, because it's the same thing. Like, cognitively, it all ends up the same thing. It's the same circle. Because what you're being bothered by is exactly what Hegel does to everyone else. I mean, literally. That's what he does with everybody else. He's like, forget about what they say that they're doing. Look at what they're actually doing. That's what makes his reading of other people very interesting. It's not about what they say. Who cares what they say? It's what they do. Look at what they're doing by what they're saying. So, when I say Hegel begins with nothing, I'm looking at what he's doing, not what he's saying. I don't care that he says I begin with being. Well, sure you do. But cognitively speaking, you're still beginning with nothing. I mean, that's the immediacy of it all. And it makes no difference. It makes no difference with being or nothing. But I think it would have been better had he just begun with nothing. It would have been clearer. That's my contention. And it's not about obviously the fact is, yes, he began with nothing. Who cares? I don't care. I don't know anybody who cares. Maybe you. Obviously you care. But beyond that, I'm not arguing the text. That's not what I'm arguing. So, why you keep returning to that is beyond me. Because, as I said, I don't care about the text itself. It makes no difference to me. I care about thinking through the text and how that thinking actually works. Because when you focus on just the text, well, the text says this. Yeah, and? I mean, that's at least just as many misreadings as it does to correct readings, I suppose. Well, most misreadings, I think. People just, grab onto, well, he said exactly this, and? It's not like Hegel doesn't change the way things work as he's working them out. So, I mean, that's exactly what Hegelian about those kinds of thought processes. As for why don't I speak to Hyperion anymore? I do speak to Hyperion. What they say is what they do. In Hegel's case, yes, I would agree. But in almost every other philosopher's case, that's not true. What they say is, or rather, what they say about what they're saying is not what they're doing. Oh, yes, because Derrida is somebody who I respect. Sorry, but Derrida is not somebody I respect on the reading of texts. Not one bit. If anything, Derrida is a great example of just misreading text. Oh, I don't respect Derrida, and I don't respect that claim, because even he knew that that's bullshit. Because Derrida couldn't read any other philosopher in a classical way without interpreting them to save his fucking life. No, I haven't read any Derrida. I don't care. I don't want to read Derrida, honestly. I have no interests. Literally, the only French philosopher I have any interest in whatsoever is Deleuze. I mean, you're saying something that everyone ought to do, which Derrida isn't the only one to say this, but full of charity. Hello. I mean, why would you quote Derrida on his authority on this? Nothing. He has no authority whatsoever. That he's not the first one to come up with charitable hermeneutics. Well, yeah, I literally have a Deleuze quote on that, posted on my Facebook wall. I love it. And like, once again, I mean, I repeat, you're talking in abstraction. We want a concrete example, right? If you give me a concrete example, we can actually talk about something. I mean, like, we're talking about abstractions of like, well, of course everybody agrees. Of course everybody agrees that you should be a charitable reader. Of course everybody agrees that you ought to figure out what the lay of the land is before you actually get to judging things and then saying, okay, now I'm going to interpret it. But everybody knows that doesn't actually happen. Didn't happen with Deleuze, didn't happen with Derrida, didn't happen with Hegel, didn't happen with Marx, didn't happen with anybody. There is no way to read the orthodoxy and not get an interpretation. I mean, there's no authority to orthodoxy whatsoever. I mean, that's an anti-Hegelian standpoint. Like, there is no reason why the orthodoxy has any value whatsoever in being the basis of your beginning interpretation at all. Well, no shit. Have I been saying that? I mean, like, we have agreed. The text starts with being. It starts with the immediacy of being. But I'm saying that's equivalent to nothing, and that's the case. So, you know, am I debating the fact that the text starts with being? No. You can literally open the fucking book in every translation, from German to English to Spanish to Portuguese, every other language. Yeah, it's going to start with being. I never said the book textually starts with being. I'm saying it essentially starts with nothing. Note, Derrida does not have a direct text on Hegel, although he is certainly a principal philosopher, Derrida. McLuhan. Yeah, I haven't read McLuhan. Yeah, the name rings a bell. I have no idea who he is. Yes, I know quite a few things. One, he explains the reason why in the beginning introductory chapter, the essays of the logic. But what I'm saying is it works just the same with nothing. As a matter of fact, it works better. And every time I explain it to anybody, it's worked better if I explain it with nothing rather than being. Mainly because the way Hegel does in the logic is flawed. Of that, I'm certain. Not only because, oh, I'm just, being some sort of egotistical person who just says, oh, I can do better than Hegel. No, like, it actually dawned on me just about like a year and a half ago, like that was a problem, mainly because of the very way that he says it. The very transition from nothing to being is completely flawed. It's not valid. Even though, like, he later does explain it much, much later. Far more valid? No, that can't be the case. I mean, look, that makes no sense. It is not more valid to begin with being than nothing. I mean, Hegel himself says that, it makes no difference. One can begin with just as much with being and nothing. They're literally equivalent determinations. So on that case, I mean, you're just full of it. And not only full of it just because of a textual thing, not only can we reference textual quotes from Hegel saying that they are equivalent and it doesn't matter what you begin with, you can also just show it logically in the circular way of things, the very process of cognition, that it doesn't matter which one you actually begin with. Like, there is no functional superiority between the immediate being and the immediate non-being. Well, they are equivalent at all points. I mean, at what point can you give me a concrete example where the being and non-being of things is not equivalent? At what point is a being not a non-being? I mean, at what point is an essence not itself an appearance of an appearance? An appearance and appearance of an essence? Or rather, essence is essential to an essence. Because I can't think of one. I mean, literally anything I can think of, you can turn up the determinations circularly. Yeah, but we're not talking about it being, we're talking about being. Yeah, we're not talking about that though. This is not Heidegger. We're talking about like just being, pure being. My dog in being also is non-being. Whatever is an appearance of my dog is also essential to my dog. I mean, those two things can be interchanged about just about anything. I can't think of a single thing in where being and non-being are not interchangeable. Okay. Hey, Jinden, can you give me a concrete example of where they are not equal? Right. Can you give me an example in which I cannot say that a being, or rather that being is non-being? That to be is also not to be. You know, where is it an example where things can just be or not be, and like we cannot switch from one to the other without, you know, violating some logical operation? Because that's where I'm coming at it from. I mean, give me a concrete example where I can't do that. But we're not talking about beings. I'm talking about being. I mean, the fact that my dog is also the fact that he is not. And also, I don't see how beings makes any difference. I mean, to be a being is also to not be a being. I mean, that's the categorical level of self-referential negation. No, it isn't what? Sorry, I mean, like, I know you guys are a bit on delay, so, you know, I'm talking and... Oh, being is a state. Oh, okay, so you're not talking about even the same things as we are. Okay, we're not even talking about the same things. Yeah, okay. I don't do the whole, like, being is a state thing. To me, being is not a state. Like, one is not in the state of being and the state of non-being. To me, that makes no difference. Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't get the point across, actually, because being as I'm talking about it is not a state. You know, you're not in the state of being or the state of non-being. I mean, it's a completely immediate. We're not talking about being and beings. I'm asking you for an example where being and nothing are not interchangeable, where to be is not to be. I mean, at what, where can you show me an example, a concrete example where this is the case? Because I can't think of one. Because as far as the logic goes, from the very beginning, to be is not to be. That in order to be, things at the same time have to not be. I mean, that's the lesson, that's the intelligible revelation, you could say, about determinate being, existence, something and other, that to be is not to be. But how does that not apply to beings? I mean, beings are the individual existence of the universal. They are as much and in as much as they are not. We're certainly not dealing with Aristotelians, more so Heidegger. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, this just reminds me of Heidegger's bullshit. Being as an act. If that's a qualitative act, I would not agree. If by being we literally mean act, then sure, I agree. But then everything is being. No, he doesn't. Even though, I mean, Hegel also makes a difference between being and beings. I mean, it's literally right there in the second chapter of the Logic Existence, where we begin the reflections of the internal particular determinations. Yeah, I don't know where you're getting this reading of Hegel. Yeah, Heidegger is one of those people who definitely does not follow Derrida's rule of charitable reading, which Derrida also didn't follow, uh, which nobody ever follows. Yeah, honestly, like it doesn't feel like we're talking about the same thing at all. Like it feels like you're bringing other people into Hegel, which are not Hegel, because I have never, ever heard this perspective of yours, and it does not strike me as uh, coherent with the text that I know. Like this whole preoccupation with being and beings, I've never seen this in Hegel. Nothing I've ever read uh, ever deals with that question. Hegel doesn't care. It's not a very interesting question. I mean, it's done and dealt with in Chapter 2 of the Science of Logic. And Chapter 2 of the Science of Logic deals precisely with the fact that to be a particular being is exactly to be and not be at the same time. That is existence. No, not at all. Like this conversation is banal. Yeah, I would not compare the depth of this conversation to any of Heidegger's stuff. I'm not a fan of Heidegger, but I can recognize he was a genuinely deep thinker, and so you read his stuff and it's good. Even though I haven't read that much, I've only read like an essay of his. I think like there's a short essay, like what is metaphysics, which I thought was interesting enough, but it didn't really. I started reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I read like the first 6 chapters, and then I got bored. Spengler, is Spengler the guy with the human dogs? Oh well, I mean, never mind. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of Germans named Spengler. So, no. Oh, I definitely have not read Spengler then. Stigler, yes. Stigler's human dogs. We're not stuck on German idealism. We move through whatever interests us, honestly. So yeah, anthroposophy, aliens. I mean, like we stick around the topic mainly because, well, it's endlessly interesting. You literally can dig in the German idealist for the rest of your life and not have to go anywhere else for just about anything. Oh yeah, we're into esoteric stuff. Like I like Steiner. I like what's his name? Swedenborg. I like the occult stuff. I like the stuff on alchemy. I want to read Buma. I want to read probably some Rosicrucian stuff. Probably some stuff by what's his name, Paracelsus. Yeah, I like to read the stuff by John Dee, like the journals of the shit that the angels told him. I mean, I'd like to read some other German idealists other than Hegel. Like, I'd want to read like some stuff by Schelling eventually. Some stuff by, I mean, Fichte's good. I've read some Fichte. I like Fichte. I'd like to read Leibniz stuff sometime. I mean, for the most part, like, I just don't read other people because there's not many other people to read it with, and I get bored reading stuff alone, honestly. And so, you know, having a group to read with, and I mean actually read, and not just like, oh well, you know, let's all read this week and meet up, you know, on you know, Sunday for like half an hour and talk about it in no detail, and you know, just throw out these random dumb questions that are, you know, if you had read the text, you would obviously know. Or, you know, just like people not reading texts and not discussing anything, and it just turns into a mundane social gathering online or in person. I hate those, and it annoys me. So I'd rather just like actually read the text aloud with people, and that way people don't have an excuse saying like, oh, I forgot to read it. Oh, well, you know, I didn't really pay attention to that part. Let me go reread it, you know, next week. And, you know, I'll get back to you on that. You know, I'd like to have you there, and then, you know, if I say like, you know, we have questions or I have comments, it's very, very easy to get immediate feedback then, and, you know, talk about things, as opposed to doing these rather fruitless spaced out readings, if I could describe them that way. Because every other group that I've done or I've seen try to take off with like, oh, the guy, let's read this one chapter this week and let's talk about it, they all die within like less than 2 chapters. Nobody reads. Nobody even, like, even though the people who read, they don't know what the fuck to talk about, they don't know what the fuck like to even ask. These groups just die. And so, I mean, to me, it's really boring to read alone. And my mind works best when I'm reading and trying to explain things as I'm reading. And I mean, that's how I got Hegel. I mean, of course, certain somebody here does not think that I get Hegel, and I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not a Hegel expert. You know, I'm not putting myself out as a Hegel expert, but what little I do know, I have much confidence in, until proven otherwise. Which, at least in this talk, I did not feel that he told me otherwise. Except for the fact that the text begins with being. We didn't know that. But anyways, my phone is about to die, and so I'm gonna leave you all be. For those of you who showed up and listened to me ramble and ask some questions, pertinent or not, and basically entertain me, thanks for showing up. I'll see you around. I'll see you when I do another stream. I'll probably do a stream on my birthday. We'll see about that. So anyways, see you around.